G'day viewers, welcome back to Aussie Backyard Food. Today I'm coming to you from my very own tomato forest. It's a wonderful place to be. Although I've got so many tomatoes, I've got a bit of a problem. I just don't know what to do with them all. Today's episode is all about that problem, if you can call it one really. Believe it or not, I used to think it was a problem, till I spoke to a good old Italian mate of mine, Giuseppe. I said, Giuseppe, what am I going to do? I've got too many tomatoes. I'm eating them breakfast, lunch and dinner. I'm getting a little bit sick of them. Sure no, he said. There is no such a thing as too many tomatoes. I said, Giuseppe, well, please explain. Sure no. You know what you got to do when life, she throws at you too many tomatoes. I felt a bit of a goose because my response was, make lemonade? Sure no. What have you been doing? You've been smoking those tomatoes. When life, she throws at you too many of the tomatoes, you make the passata. Look at that, folks. That's what we're here to do today. We're going to make the most delicious tomato sauce out of our Tigerella tomatoes so that we can enjoy that full sun-ripened tomato flavour all year round. Let's get into it. Isn't she beautiful? Look at that. But before we start the harvest, I'll show you a bit about my setup. As you can see, she's fully enclosed. I've got all our tomato vines in there behind aviary mesh, the sort of mesh you'd use to enclose finches. You can see it's 10mm by 10mm, and it's small enough to keep out the butterflies, but yet big enough to allow your pollinating insects in. And that means we can stay pesticide free, which is a good place to be. Also, you'll notice that the bottom half of the plants, which are almost touching the top of our enclosure now, the bottom half is relatively bare. That's because as they grow, I take the lower leaves off. It helps to inhibit fungal diseases which tomatoes are prone to, and as you can see, the results speak for themselves. They're very healthy vines and they're covered in tomatoes, and they're probably only at half production. I will be getting tomatoes for another couple of months yet. So here's one I've left for the purposes of demonstration. You can see most of the lower leaves are still in place. But what we do to remove them is simply come along in here and just exert some pressure on the base of the leaf where it attaches to the stem, the main stem, and you'll see there's a weak point there where our leaf detaches. So besides our trusty Tigerellas, I experimented with 3 other varieties this year. This one I seem to remember was called a tree tomato, although that's what they also call a tamarillo, so I'm not 100% sure about the variety, although it does grow some nice large tomatoes, and based on its performance so far, I intend to save some seeds and give it another crack next year. And as far as the varieties I'm not so happy with, these three on the end here are Constelluto di Marmande. And as you can see, they're not faring so well. So I'm going to give them a wide berth next year. And the third variety was this yellow grape type small variety, and there's virtually nothing left of that. So once again, I'm going to give it a miss next year. But anyway, you live and you learn. So you can see when your leaves start to yellow and then brown on the end like that, it's definitely well and truly time for them to be removed. In fact, I find it better to even remove them before they get to that point. Just preempt that, and that's going to mean your tomatoes will stay relatively disease-free. You're just allowing air to circulate in between all of your plants and keep those fungal issues down to a minimum. However, one word of warning: it's important to maintain a sort of umbrella-like cover of foliage up the top to provide protection to your tomatoes against the extreme heat of the summer sun, especially in the middle of the day when the sun is directly above your tomatoes. One other advantage in taking away some of those surplus leaves on your tomato vines is that you're actually making your tomato plants more drought tolerant. By reducing the amount of foliage on your plants, you're actually reducing also their water requirement. We've actually had an extremely hot and dry summer here in the Blue Mountains. Even the lead up to summer was extremely, unseasonally hot and dry. Yet our tomato vines continue to thrive. And part of that is because of our defoliating technique, and also the thick layers of mulch we have around the base of our tomato vines. Tomatoes love to be well mulched. You'll also notice I like to prune off everything and just maintain 2 central leaders or growth tips. And that's simply by every time I see a new shoot develop in the crux of a leaf, I pinch it out, maintaining that central leader or pair of leaders. And the last tip for having healthy and productive tomato vines is the material I use to tie them off to their stakes. I've experimented once again with many different materials, from rope to stockings, but by far I found the best stuff, so far anyway, is grafting tape. It's nice and soft, strong enough but still stretchy, so that it won't harm your tender tomato shoots. There's the result for today's effort. A bucket full of tomato leaves to go straight to the chook pen, and a bucket full of tomatoes to add to what we harvested a couple of days ago to make our authentic sun-ripened tomato passata.
You don't smack at a tomato?
Righty-ho. Well, we've got our tomatoes on the boil, our various sized jars ready to go. I never throw away a jar because I find they're such a useful storage container. This year we're going for a bit of a stripped back sauce. Simply tomatoes, salt and pepper. My thinking on that is that it'll be much more useful in the kitchen to have a general use sauce that I can flavour up with the herbs and spices to suit the dish of the day, whether it be a pizza sauce, a pasta sauce, an Indian curry, or even a Mexican dish. One other thing you might have noticed is I didn't wash my tomatoes. That, people, is simply one of the many benefits of being pesticide free. Alright, we've let our tomato passata boil away for a good hour, and as you can see, It's well and truly liquefied. In the past, I haven't really bothered with being too fussy about the temperature. I've got my Passata to, thinking that, you know, as long as it's over 70 degrees Celsius, which is about 160 Fahrenheit, that will self-sterilise the jar by flipping over onto the lid. You'll even sterilise that lid. And that's the key to being able to store your Passata for months and even years at a time without it going bad. So now we've got it up to heat, I'm going to turn the heat off, allowing our sauce Passata to cool a little. Take our thermometer out, and I'm going to use now my favourite kitchen utensil. It's, I reckon, one of the best labour saving devices there is in the kitchen. I mean, we could have used a blender and simply done this in batches, thrown it in the pot, then heated it up before adding it to the jar. But I'm not a big fan of washing up. So this, I find, is the most effort efficient approach and the most washing up free. So here it is, my favourite utensil, the good old stab blender.
Giuseppe, what do you got to do when life throws at you too many tomatoes? You know, you gotta make a Passata.
And there we go, a couple of minutes of stab blending, and that's all we've got to wash up. Now here's where we salt and pepper to taste.
Passata.
Keeping in mind we added a bit earlier, but the added advantage with adding a bit more salt, keeping in mind that you can always add more later, is salt will help to stop your tomato passata from going bad. Because let's face it, no one wants a tomato passata non grata.
Giuseppe is such a good boy. He loves the tomato.
I think even Giuseppe would be happy with that. So now it's time to turn our heat on again. Whack our thermometer in there. Really want to just get it over 90 degrees, I reckon. Because like I say, that's just going to sterilise that jar. As you can see, all my jars are cleaned before I stored them. So really any bacteria or germs of any description inside there that might have happened to develop in that storage period, they're going to be wiped out. So it's just a matter of filling it up as close as we can to the top and tipping it upside down and leaving it there for a couple of minutes. Then she's good to keep for who knows. Our tomato passata's boiling away there. It's near on 100 degrees Celsius, which is 210 Fahrenheit. So it's good to go into our jars. And as you see, I've got a funnel here just to make it less messy.
Tomato? My mama.
Another worthwhile job complete. And I think it's only time that I reward myself. Not only is that not tomato passata non grata, I'm rewarding myself with a tomato passata heart starter.
The Passata.
Cheers.
The Passata.
What was in that drink?
The Passata.